that you might be afraid of. So I'm encouraging them to be as candid as possible. We have a variety of degrees of that path towards a PhD or that are here. So you've read the bios, you know that we have someone who's just getting started. We have a postdoc here. One postdoc, right? Okay. Yes. 2 postdocs. And we have a graduate, someone who has a PhD and works at CNS, mentors students, and also probably mentors faculty too. And so I think we have a pretty good variety. Please don't ask any questions. But the point is for you to ask questions that make sense, and I hope that they will be candid and that you will get some insight about grad school. I'm supposed to be moderated, but I can't moderate if you guys want to ask questions. So I hope you read the bio. We gave you the bio so that you could see the different backgrounds, and maybe that would help spur some questions. So I might ask first question, and I think the first question is, why did you pursue the career path the educational path that you pursued?
Just go down the line.
Just go down the line.
Okay, so hi, I'm Steven. I do theoretical physics in the physics department here at Harvard. Why did I go into science? I kind of liked math classes in school. I took some classes in college, it was very different, but I still enjoyed it. And I tried out a few different disciplines. I tried some biology classes and chemistry classes and physics classes. I kind of liked the physics classes the most, and so that's what happened. At a certain point, though, I think some people, I know some of my friends here in the department have had this happen. You sort of keep studying the discipline because you find it interesting and because it's challenging. But it's all important to have be able to be passionate about what you're doing, just from a research point of view. So I was lucky enough to find a discipline of research, material science, that I really enjoyed and I found to be important both to myself and also to society. And that's sort of the reason I decided to keep working on it. I don't know what sort of job I'll have after my PhD's done, but I really want to keep doing research because it's hard work and it's perhaps not thanked very much, especially in the US nowadays, but I think it has a positive impact. So that's why I've been
So I actually haven't started grad school yet. I very recently made the decision that is what I wanted to do. So hopefully time will tell that was a good choice for me. But so the reason I decided to apply to grad school and go to grad school was that I was enjoying my coursework. I was curious about taking more classes in those areas. And I was enjoying the research I was doing, and I enjoyed the experience of being in a lab group and doing research and having sort of that independence to work on your own project, but also a group of people that you're working with and supporting you. So it seemed like something that I could see myself continue to do and enjoy doing. And so I decided to just apply and see what happened. And here I am.
So in my undergrad, I picked a degree called engineering physics at the University of Pittsburgh. Basically, I couldn't decide what to major in, so I majored in everything. The engineering physics program there was a third electrical engineering, a third material science, and a third physics. And then I did a research thesis in the chemistry department because I discovered that they have the really cool lasers. So I got hooked on playing with lasers, actually, in high school. And then, this will show how old I am. I graduated right when the dot-com bubble burst, and so there were no jobs. And so I applied to go to grad school because there were no jobs. Everyone else who had just been laid off was also applying to go to grad school, so it was sort of a terrible year to get into grad school. I got into the University of Michigan. I did my PhD there in the applied physics program, where you took the physics coursework, but then I went back and worked with physical chemists because they have lasers. I got my PhD degree right when the economic meltdown happened, the housing crisis. And yeah, so then I took a postdoc rather than finding a job because there were no jobs. I did a postdoc at Northeastern for a year and a half in the biophysics department, still zapping stuff with lasers. But I started burning out on overnights in labs. When you're an experimentalist and your experiments are working, you stay there and you keep working until it doesn't work anymore, and then you go home. So too many overnights in labs. After grad school and postdoc, I landed a job at the Center for Nanoscale Systems. Basically, they had a spectroscopy lab, which I run now. I got the job at the Center for Nanoscale Systems at Harvard about 7 years ago. I walked in and the manager, the previous spectroscopist had left. The manager says, "Do you know how to run this laser?" I said, "Yes, I can run it in my sleep, no problem." And so you're hired, we're done. All right, so, and that's what I do now. So I enjoy my job now because it's 5 o'clock, I get to go home whether the experiment's working or not. I'll be in at 9 a.m. tomorrow when we can go. But then a variety of people bring different projects. So I have about 500 people annually coming through my spectroscopy lab, and they bring fuel cells, they bring cancer cells, they bring solar cells, they bring 2D materials, they bring glaze from ancient Chinese pots, they bring paint from ancient Greek pots, the archaeologists bring teeth, you name it, it's probably been through my lab at some point. I've only had one dead rat, slices of mouse brains, whatever. And so it's an interesting job because I get to characterize a wide variety of materials with different optical techniques.
Hi everyone, Chida. I did my bachelor was in Turkey, but I was always very interested with the biology when I was in high school. And then one day I remembered one of my chemistry teacher explaining how does this sp bonding is changing the carbon's behavior, and then I decided to continue in such kind of fields, and then I ended up in the material science. After learning the new stuff is always really interesting for me, so that's why I was always thinking I should continue with my to do PhD, and how I decided to do PhD, and I went to Germany. I finished the PhD there in Germany in 2015, and I came here also. Seeing atoms are quite interesting actually. So yeah, I really like what am I doing. At the moment, I am in the decision whether I should continue in academia or going to industry. Maybe it's a big question for me. But yeah, I really like to learn new stuff. I think if you don't want to do all the time the same thing, I think you should definitely continue with the grad school. I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but I really encourage. It's really nice.
Yeah, hi, my name is Young Jae-shin, and why I'm doing this because first of all, definitely I love research, I love science. That's why I'm doing the research of this stuff. And then I got the PhD from University of Michigan. Then right after getting the PhD degree, still while I'm staying in the academic area. So first motivation, maybe you guys are all the undergrads, so maybe the first motivation for the graduate school, because I believe the graduate school make the student or train student more creative. So based on my experience, that's the only program can make the people creative. You can be creative without the graduate program, but this is the only program people can be creative. And then nowadays, the society or community, the world need more creative people. Like the smartphone, other things, the technology level is so complicated, and then it's more what this industry more PhD degree program. And then another thing is in reality, only the people who got the degree, like the PhD, increase the salary on average up in a decade. So postgraduate, post-undergraduate, or high school level, their all salaries decrease, but only the graduate level is on average. On average, there is a lot of exceptions.
For STEM, right?
Yeah, it's
For
STEM.
STEM.
Yeah. Well, actually, other parts also decreasing. So, like, other than STEM, the parts is the student university. Hired less students, but not hired now. The admissions. So, so that in a real also. So right after the PhD, I might get the job in private sector or industry area, but there's a two. While I'm doing postdoc, now I'm doing the research associate, but I don't see any difference. Because in academic area, it's more free environment. So if I go for the industry area, then there are a lot of variable factors engaged, like the money problem, other things, people's need. But in the academic area, with the reasonable salary, I can do whatever I like more freely. So that's why I'm doing this. So yeah, that's all.
I should say I agonized a lot over whether or not I should apply to graduate school last year. And I thought a lot about whether or not I really wanted to do that, or it was sort of like, I know what academics looks like to some extent. I know what it looks like to apply to academic things. I don't know how to look for a job necessarily. And so I thought about that a lot and why I was applying. And in the end, I tried a lot of things that I've been saying that I enjoyed the environment of being in an academic setting. And I felt like I would have the most flexibility doing that. There's a lot of options for what research you can do, even with the physics program. And so I didn't feel like I would be stuck, and that I would have a lot of choices about what I did, and the ability to choose something that was interesting to me and worked well with sort of the kind of life I wanted to have and the things I was interested in thinking about. And I felt like it would set me up well for things that I might want to do later on.
So I have a question. I'm going to ask a few questions and then I'll open up to the floor, okay? My next question would be, how many of you had research experience before you applied to graduate school? Yay, check. And what was the application process like? I often get that question from students. They're usually trying to decide what their interests are and how to pair that with the right school or with the right professor. And so I've recommended certain steps, but I'd like to hear from you guys to describe what do you recommend for that process and figure out what kind of school or what you want to study and maybe even funding. How many of you had to pay for any of your graduate work? No, that you had to pay. Check. And so if you could describe, how that came about and also what the process was for you and some things that you may have done differently, some recommendations you have for if you're trying to make that decision, what that process is like.
So can I just jump in and give people sort of a thumbnail what the grad school programs typically are? Usually the undergrads I talk to have no real clue of how a graduate program works.
Mm-hmm.
And so in science and engineering, as opposed to medicine or law or something like that, you typically take courses for the first 2 years, and usually 2 to 3 years of coursework for whatever your program is, chemistry, physics, engineering. You typically get paid. So you get paid when I was a grad student, it was like 20K. It's probably crept up to 25K. I'm not sure what the stipends are.
Some people 30, depends.
Some people. Right, so you are no longer paying to go to school. The school is paying you. So that's a big thing that a lot of people don't realize, that they think they're going to take out more loans or whatever. You take out loans to go to med school, take out loans to go to law school. When you're getting a PhD, the school's paying you to go, which is nice. What are
Nice.
Can I just, did you have to TA or with your research assistant? Can you
Right.
talk
So,
about that?
what are they paying you for? So you end up being an employee and you do one of two jobs. You're either teaching, so you've seen TAs in your courses, you're doing the grading, you're proctoring the exams, you're giving the recitations, things like that. So all the things that professors don't like doing and are pretty boring. So grading is boring, we all hate grading, but hey, that's the job, you get paid for it. Or you're being a research assistant, so you're getting paid to do research. Your advisor has a grant, they've written an application to the National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, some usually government agency that gives them money. Here's $1 million for your project. A grant is, the professor says, I have this great idea, I'm going to solve X, Y, Z. Please give me money so I can do it. None of the labs I ever worked in, the professor actually had any idea how to run the equipment in the lab.
We forget.
They don't have time to write grants. They don't know how to run the equipment. So it's the grad students who are actually running the equipment, actually making the discoveries, actually doing all the manual labor in the lab. And so you're getting paid to be a research assistant to do the work in the lab. So you get paid for your PhD, either if you're teaching classes, doing grading, or you're doing research. Your degree, your PhD is awarded when you've sort of done enough research to say, you have to write a book. It's called a thesis. It's like 150 to 200 pages long. I have mine in my office if you want to come see what they look like. So whenever you get sort of enough research done to write a book, then you get to graduate. So it's not you get out in 5 years, you get out in 6 years. A typical PhD is sort of 6 to 8 years. Originally it was 4 years, and now it's crept 6 years is pretty standard, 6 to 7 years. I had friends who were in grad school for 10 years because they were sort of comfortable, and a pipe had exploded and washed away their entire optics table, and so that was a whole year. Anyway, these things happen. But it's not like law school's 3 years, you're done. Med school's 4 years, you're done. PhD is until you can write your book.
And there's candidacy process, which may differ depending on what school you go to. Yeah.
Right. So as you do your coursework, often schools give you a master's degree, sort of as an out. You need it. You decide this is not really for me. After your coursework, you are usually awarded a master's degree. Once you're past the coursework and you've proposed your project, you've worked with your advisor, and this is the other misconception a lot of people have about grad school. Oh, I'm going to go to grad school and I'm going to study this. No, you're going to study whatever your advisor has money for. You pay whatever the grant is for, that's what you're going to study. You can go and talk to different advisors and see what they have money for. But it's not carte blanche. You don't get to just pick, I'm going to go study this, that, or you're going to study whatever is being funded at that moment. So once you have an advisor, you've gone around and talked to people and said, all right, this sounds like an interesting project, you have money for it, you've done your 2 years of coursework, you become a candidate. So you go up for an exam. My exam was, so you have to do a qualifying exam. My qualifying exams were oral, some other departments have written exams, and that proves you know the body of knowledge to be a physicist. So the body of knowledge to be a chemist. And then you have your project proposal. This is what I'm going to work on for the next 4 years, and sort of in big brush strokes. I'm going to study surface chemistry of polymers and how barnacles adhere to them, so that the Navy will give us money to keep barnacles from sticking to ships or whatever. So once you go in front of the panel and propose your project, and they say, okay, that's a decent project, go work on it for the next 3 or 4 years, then you're officially a candidate. And then after you've written your book, your thesis, you go up in front of a panel of professors again. Usually, you don't get put up in front of a panel of professors unless your advisor is sure you're ready. So final thesis defense is not as stressful as you would imagine, because you've already written the book, you're the world's expert on this thing, you're the only one who actually knows everything about it. And your advisor isn't going to put you up for your defense unless you're actually ready. So it's more of a celebration. Oh, look, everyone, I'm going to talk for an hour about how I've spent the last 6 years of my life. All right, so that's, I'm sorry.
So thank you so much for that. But, thank you for giving us that context. The question that we were getting at is, so you talked about an advisor and a project and funding. Those are all very important aspects of figuring out where you should go to graduate school. Let's say you decide you want to go to U of Michigan. Then you want to be in physics. You already know that because they do they do robotics, in engineering, robotics or something, and you're really interested in robotics. And then you have to think about what specifically do they do, and do they have money, because you have to get paid, right? There are some ways that you could, there's some fellowships you can apply on your own and have your own money. And that is very attractive to research labs. But guess what? You still have to have the capacity to do research there. So even if you have your own unique idea, you're that super genius and ahead of the game, you also have to make sure that what you want to do can be done in that lab. So that so who you decide to work with or what school you decide to go to, really, you have to have some general idea of what you want to do.
That institution or that college is not in your previous college. How are you going to achieve
That's a very good question. So I can tell you what I did, and I think people could also chime in. One of the things that you do, people have money. There might be some. This is not an absolute thing, but one way someone has money to support you is, are they actively publishing? So you look at their papers that they're publishing. Are they active? Is it one or two publications a year, or is it 5 or 10 publications a year? So that's an indication. Also, the size of their research group. But that's another. I'm talking too much. The panel's supposed to be saying this stuff. Sorry. But that's another issue, because you have to know whether you want to be in a large group. You could be, how big is Whiteside's group, for example? Anybody know? So there's this famous professor at Harvard, has 70 people in his group. So do you want to be in a group of 70, or do you want to be in a group of 5 or 10? So that's another factor. But I guess what we were trying to get to is, what was that process for you? How did you guys go about deciding where you wanted to go? Once you were there, what research group made sense for you? What are some of the things that you experienced that you could share, or some advice?
I find the conference very useful. You can listen to different professors, and also you can get some information about the professors from the students as well, because they're big-old students. So you can contact them, talk with them, and then get some information about how the group is working. Do they have with their professors, and do they have some funding? And also, you can set a meeting during these conferences. You can directly ask the professor whether they have money or not. No, I mean,
seriously, indirectly, yes.
Yeah, you will not ask them, do you have money? But you can ask, I would like to do my PhD in your group. Can you support me in this thing? So that's all. And if they don't have the money, they will just say, no.
A good way of wording that is asking them if they're looking for additional students. So you say it politely. So that's what it means. You have funding sources, because usually in the funding, like in these grants that they do, one of the goals of the grant is, hire 2 postdocs, hire 4 undergraduates, or hire 2 postdocs, 1 graduate student, 1 undergraduate. So you can ask them, are you looking for additional students? That's actually one of the goals.
Sometimes maybe it's difficult to reach to the professors. Of course, they are really busy. So you can contact with any group member of their students or their postdocs or their assistants.
What about the internet?
Yeah,
Yeah,
even
exactly.
even Google it.
Google it and talk and then write an email. Even call them. Not directly to the professor.
I mostly didn't worry too much about the funding part explicitly until after I had decided where to apply and seen where I got in. So I did a lot of research about different universities and really looking into what research was happening there and what groups were really active and so on. Who was publishing, what were they publishing, what sounded interesting to me. And I only applied to schools that had several groups that I thought I would enjoy working in. Or multiple groups that were doing something that was interesting to me, because you don't know who exactly is going to have funding at the right time for you. And so I did a lot of research. Most groups have pages, websites that you can read through, and you can look them up on archive and see their recent papers. So there's a lot of information you can get that way. And then one thing I wish I had done more of was I emailed professors. And I ended up having a couple Skype calls with professors, and I talked on the phone with the professor I'm working for this summer, and then I actually came and visited Harvard before I had been accepted and toured some of the labs as a result of that. And I wish I had done more of that because I got a lot of useful information that way. I learned a lot more about what the professor was doing, and I got to talk with all the students. Usually, even if I just had a Skype call with the professor, they would also give me email addresses for a couple of their grad students and say, hey, ask my grad student what they think of working with me, because they'll give you a more honest impression of what it's like to actually be in this group and actually be a student at this university. And so I wish I had done more of that. It was something that I was really nervous about and put it off until later, but it ended up being really valuable. What else?
That was good.
I would say a general rule of thumb, and this is true for both. I think it's more true for graduate school than for undergraduate. The sort of the deviation between different faculty members at one university is much larger than the deviation on average across every single university. What I'm trying to say is, if you try to only look at universities that you think are like highly ranked in a certain field, that's in general a good thing to do. But depending on who you end up working with at that university, you could have a much worse experience than some random university that you would think is very at that top.
Yeah.
So, then it makes it really hard to narrow down what to look for.
I also asked people that I worked for, different professors, if they had recommendations for specific professors that I might look into their groups for, or universities that in general have a lot of research in areas I was interested in.
If there's someone at your current university that you either taken a class with or that you've worked with that's maybe doing research in a field you're interested in, you can ask them where they think there are good. You have to ask yourself what you want out of grad school. Some people really want to have a young faculty member as their advisor, because that means you're going to be involved in putting together a lab or starting a brand new project or really pushing the envelope on something really brand new. But some people would rather focus less on helping establish a new topic and would rather work on something that they're already excited about that already exists. So it's going to be different for everyone. I think, like you said, talking to faculty or to graduate students, either at other universities or your own, is the best bet, because they're going to have the most kind of insight, because they're experts in the field.
So just to wrap up the funding thing we were talking about earlier, so then once I was accepted places, then I spent more time looking into finding out who actually had funding and if they could support students and so on. And then most of the places I was accepted, really your first year was funded. And then the second year you would teach for your funding, and it really was mostly in the third year that you needed research funding from a professor to
So you typically don't have to have your advisor picked out ahead of time. You are taking courses your first 2 years, you don't have time to do much research. Often programs will have you do rotations. You rotate between a couple of different labs, one semester this lab, one semester the next lab, one semester the third lab, and you pick, did I like any of those 3 labs? And so you get to sort of experience the culture. Each lab has their own culture. Although as a rotation student, you tend to be sort of ignored, to be honest. You're going to be here 3 months. We don't have, anyway, but you get to actually see, are the other students happy? This is important. It's going to be another 4 or 5 years of your life. You want to be in a lab where the students are happy, where everyone's happy. There was a mention on new faculty versus older faculty. New faculty are trying to set up their career, their place in the world. They're going to push you a lot harder. You should know whether you like being pushed, whether you need that external, someone telling you to get back in the lab and do stuff. I've worked for young faculty, I've worked for older faculty. The older faculty who are already established, they're like, yeah, I'm already established, I have my nature paper. If you want to do stuff, that's great, but I'm not going to be riding your tail the whole time because I just don't have enough energy. So do you work well with more freedom and not being pushed, or is it important for someone to give you this external pressure when everyone has their own? Just know younger faculty are sometimes exciting to work with because they're doing new things and they're pushing hard, but they're going to push hard.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things you learn in grad school has nothing to do with your field. It has to do with learning how you work as an individual most efficiently. Like what sort of goals you need to set to yourself, what sort of hours can you work, how much rest do you need, how much time do you have to focus on various stuff, like how much do I have to do research, how much do I have to do like manual labor, how much do I have to do literature review. And managing that is actually one of the key, managing your time is one of the key things you learn in graduate school. So for the first time, your goal is not, okay, I have a test in 3 weeks and I have to have 2 homework sets done. The goal is, I need to make a discovery in a new field. I have no idea what's going on. You have to set your own goals and expectations. So UG advisors will help you with this. So as you develop in graduate school, it becomes more and more something to figure out. It's one of the reasons why when you finish a PhD, a lot of times people will go on to do research or work in a field unrelated to their PhD. Just because doing the PhD trains you as a critical thinker and as a research worker. Not just in a specific field, but just in general. So I think that's maybe one of the undersold aspects.
A question from the audience.
How did you guys know for sure that you wanted to go to grad school? I feel like the simplest way to ask this without projecting all my feelings onto you guys. But how did you know that you wanted to go to grad school? And 2, how did you know that you felt that passionate about the subject that was studying?
Good question.
I was not sure that I wanted to go to grad school. But I knew that it was something that was at least worth my looking into. And so I did. I looked into it. And in that process, I learned a lot more things that I thought were interesting. The actual process of applying was really exhausting. And so that was hard. But once all of that was behind me and I sort of was able to spend the spring semester really focused on my thesis, and then started getting acceptances, then I started to get really quite excited about the idea of going to grad school. And that was a combination of enjoying conversations with various professors I'd had, going to the grad school visits and meeting some of the students and seeing some of the groups, and actually really enjoying finishing my thesis for the most part. So all of those things were sort of very affirming that this was a good thing for me to do. But it wasn't something that I was sure of until long after all the applications were submitted. And for me, there was a little bit of, okay, I decided I was going to do this. I made myself finish the applications. And then after that, I took a step back and thought about it a little bit more. And then felt like that really was a good idea.
I was do I know I want to do PhD. So during the undergrad, you take some courses. Some of them you like them, some of them not. But some courses you would like to learn more about it. So you have curiosity, and if you want to learn, so you should continue with the grad graduate in grad school and then focus on such kind of things. And I think it's a good way to find out and be here.
So I have sort of maybe an interesting perspective on this. My girlfriend, in college, she did a chemical engineering degree. She currently works as a So she currently works as a researcher/engineer, researcher/engineer at a medical company here in Boston. So and we're the same age, and we both graduated the same year. And she's now done 3 or 4 years of work in industry, and I've done 3 or 4 years of research work in graduate school. And so the first thing you have to ask yourself is, do I want to be a researcher? Do I want to do research work? And if the answer to that is yes, then you have to say, okay, do I want to work in industry, or do I want to work in academic discipline? So the nice thing about going directly into industry is you no longer have to take classes, and you get paid a lot more. The negative side is that it's a lot harder to have mobility. So generally speaking, what I've seen is that if you go in with just an undergraduate degree into a research discipline, you'll be able to do some exciting research depending on the sort of position you get. But moving up into a position where you can maybe be in charge of the project, making the big decisions about the project takes a lot longer than in graduate school. In graduate school, you often become the person making the big decisions within a few years, because the faculty member will defer your knowledge on the subject. This does happen depending on the workplace. But the difference is after 5, 6 years of your PhD, when you finish your PhD, you're now in a position where when you get hired, maybe if you do want to work in industry at the end, you're not going to be someone who's making project decisions, making management decisions. I think it's a lot harder to have a mobility in the industry.
I never even considered that. I'm glad you said that.
I talked to a couple of people actually that had graduated, finished their undergrad, and gone to work for a couple of years, and really liked the research they were doing and enjoyed it a lot, and decided to go back and get a graduate degree because after a few years they realized that they could never get to the place where they were in charge of the project and making official decisions and getting to present the work to people and so on unless they had a PhD.
I'm not sure how much of that is artificial, just from how the system's set up, but I do think you do learn different skills. There's 2 different in graduate school versus industry. But I just, just from talking, right now my girlfriend, she wants to do a master's degree because that's the only way for her to have really fast upward mobility.
Also, you should be able to create some ideas by yourself. I think this is also really important because at the end, when you have your PhD, then people think that, okay, you are done with the PhD, so you should be able to conduct research, you should run your lab or something, so you should have ideas.
Then you can always quit.
Yeah.
If you sign up for grad school and you decide you don't like it, you can leave. And you can leave with a master's degree. Finish your coursework and all right, I don't want to do research, I'm going to take a master's degree. That's fine.
And in terms of deciding what to go to graduate school in, I was a little bit non-committal at the time when I applied. Not as much as I could have been. But so I did my honors thesis in optics, and so I applied to 2 programs in optics, and then I applied to applied physics here at Harvard, and then most of the rest of the programs I applied to were pure physics. And most of those were looking at places that were really strong in AMO, but I also applied to a couple places that were stronger in the condensed matter. So I was sort of, I didn't entirely make a decision about what I most wanted to study at that point. I sort of applied places that seemed like they had a lot of good options for me, and then made a decision about what I most wanted to do after I saw what the options were.
So can you just explain what an application looks like these days?
Yeah. So that's exactly where I want to go. But can you also add to that when you started the process? When did you take, if you had to take a GRE, when did you take it? in that whole process? Yeah.
So I took the general GRE last August.
Wait, I'm sorry. Put it in context of where you were in school at the time and all that.
So really, it was the summer after my junior year that I started thinking about grad school. And part of that was that I was in a summer program, sort of like this, where the professors running it were spending a lot of time trying to get us to think about graduate school and what that would look like and so on. And so I also was around a lot of students that were also at the same time thinking about this. So I started thinking about it over the summer, going into my senior year. I decided to take the general GRE in August before I started school, just to have that out of the way before the semester got underway. So you have to take the general GRE and the physics GRE if you're applying for physics schools.
Yeah.
So, and the subject test is offered only 3 times a year in September, October, and April or something. So really you have to take the September or the October one to be in time for the deadlines for applications. And then there's also the general GRE that is, it's sort of like the SAT but harder. So I took that one in August to get it out of the way. I took the September physics GRE. And then once the tests were out of the way, then I focused more on the applications. You need a couple letters of recommendation. You need usually a personal statement and some sort of research statement. So one thing that says something about this is who I am, these are some of the things I've done, and then a statement that says something about these are some of the things I think I might want to study, and here's how I came to think that maybe I want to study this, and here are some professors that maybe I and so each of those was usually, I think, 500 words, maybe 1,000. It depends a lot on the school. And I think that was all the components of it.
One of the things that's important to remember is that I think if you want to have a successful application for graduate school, you have to sort of decide that you're not going to apply to graduate school during your junior year if you're going to apply at the beginning of your senior year. Yeah. So if you're a rising senior and you haven't decided what you want to do, you decide you do want to try to apply to grad school, what I'd recommend is planning on applying not 2 months. Because taking the physics GRE or the chemistry GRE is very challenging. You can do a lot of prep work for it. And usually having a good score on that is important. If you're a really good student, I think you can probably cram for it, probably less than a month. Still okay. But what might be really valuable is instead plan to apply a year after you graduate. This also gives you maybe a year to look for a research position at your current university or a nearby university or somewhere. And you can actually get a year of sort of pre-PhD research work done and see if you really like working full-time as a researcher. Because I know you guys did research this summer, and that's 8 weeks. And that's really valuable. But I think transitioning into doing research for multiple months on the same topic is a much different experience. So trying that out and seeing if you hate it is like a
There are also gap programs. You can if you haven't decided you want to go to grad school, but you think you want to go. Some institutions have programs you can apply to spend a year doing research and take some classes that might help prepare you for the program. I know the University of Michigan has it, MIT has it, so you can ask them about that if you're interested. Also, with the GRE, how long are the scores good for?
I think 5 years.
Okay. And so, what are your opinions on going directly from undergrad to grad school versus taking 2 years off and working in industry and then going?
I decided that I was unlikely to make myself get around to applying and going back to grad school if I took time off. So for me, that was sort of a personal decision based on the way I am. That I thought that if I started working, I would settle into working and never get around to going back. And I did want to go back.
So I went directly from undergrad to grad school. I had colleagues who had taken a couple of years off and I had industry jobs, real jobs. It's people who had real jobs were getting real money and they go back to rest and stipends and that's sort of a nasty shot. You know, they had their own apartment and suddenly they're set to roommates now. And once you get your own bathroom, you really think giving up your own bathroom. And, but then they're a lot more motivated. So I had colleagues and friends in grad school who were grad students for 10 years because they were comfortable and they sort of were scared of the real world. The people who had worked in industry are like, I'm going to get through this. And so they graduated in 5.5 years as opposed to 10 years. And so having some industry experience can make you a little more motivated and make you a little more focused in grad school and done a little faster. It's easy to sort of get comfortable and back out of grad school.
Devon, did you?
Yeah, so when you guys are planning for grad school, how many unit schools do you guys apply?
I think I applied to 6, and I did not have any of this. For that, I just sort of blindly applied to places that had large departments and figured that sorted out once I got to
I don't know how well trained everyone was for the circus undergrad admissions, but it's sort of a similar idea. You want to apply to a few schools that are you're fairly confident you'll get into, and also a few schools that are more reach schools that are challenging. I know some people apply to there's some crazy people that apply to 40 graduate schools or something like this, and I really don't recommend that. Just because you're going to go crazy trying to fill out all the applications. I think usually what I've heard from my friends I had that applied and also other people, other faculty members, they know what the current situation is. It seems that the reasonable amount is somewhere between 5 and 50, somewhere like that. So 6 or 7 is usually okay, but if you're more worried and really want to go somewhere specific, which you're not going to get in, you can apply to a few more additional schools just to be sure it's safe.
I applied 10 places, and I think that was fairly standard for the other people I knew that were applying to physics programs. They applied to like 12.
I did also 10. And then each school there's audition process fee, so don't if you apply a lot, then you have to pay more.
It's like $60 or $70. That's
So really, when I applied, it's this $100.
If the application fees are a problem, a lot of schools will have waivers for it, depending on similar to the financial aid application fees. That's an issue. You should just reach out to the school.
I got a lot of money to cover application fees from the college I was going to, but they had a pot of money set aside for people that needed help covering application fees. So that's how I was able to apply to places. Yes.
So I have a question about so my question to you is just kind of think about what you just said. It's with respect to your colleagues who and do you feel like if they had more options with respect to job opportunities, which strategies then you would very sure do that?
Yeah. So one of the so you get your PhD and then you go out and do industry and then like so what can you do for us? I know everything there is to know about this tiny little topic, and I can take apart and rebuild the laser in this one lab because that's it. And that's great. Have you ever had a real job? Where, you have to show up at 9, not be a grad student and wander in at noon? No. Yeah. So certainly having industry experience on your resume, you go to apply to an industry job and they're like, okay, so you know how industry works. You show up at 9, I still show up at 19, and the grad students don't show up from noon, so I'm a couple hours ahead of them. Having actual industry experience. There are co-op programs, especially engineering schools will have co-op programs in industry, and those are super valuable. I did co-op as an undergrad, and so I have a couple rotations. I guess I had 16 months total industry experience as an undergrad, but that the program I was in grad school didn't have any co-op experience. Some engineering schools do have co-op experiences for grad school, which is really valuable when you go to apply for industry jobs. Like, look, I know how this works. I know how to think about products and how to make the product cheaper and how to make 10,000 of them and how to get 10,000 of them and shave 10 cents off each one, and then you have profit and you need to worry about quarter shipments and things like that. That's cool. The deadlines are much like, we'll get to it next semester. Yeah, so certainly having industry experience, you can pick up industry experience while you're in grad school, or a summer internship, or a summer co-op, or you can do an rotation in co-ops.
So sometimes we also have industry connections. I've worked with a few faculty members that were currently or had in the past had students that went off to start a startup that did some sort of very specialized device. So a lot of what's going on that former student was sort of interacting still with the lab group and doing a lot of industry things. And so that can also be something to ask about.
So you all have had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just, so the faculty member who has to start off is sort of a double-edged sword. There's, yes, he's got the industry connection. There can be a clear path where you learn something in his lab and go straight to help the startup. There's also, he's distracted by the startup, so he's not paying attention to you as much. And so how much attention do you need? So you have to know yourself a little bit. Do I need an environment where I get lots of attention, or can I be a self-starter and say, hey, I need help, and just jump in? And part of it is just learning to be assertive. What I learned in 7 years at Harvard, I just have to stand up and own the room. And whoever stands up and owns the room gets to take all the marbles. So being able to be assertive, being confident is one of the things you really need to develop in grad school. So yeah, the guy with the startup. You just know that there's pros and cons to everything you should check out. So yes, he has industry connections. Yes, there's really good path to the job, but you're also going to get less attention. That's easy to train. So some of the faculty members are like MIT, they're on your lab, and there's 70 startups all at the same time. And so I've talked to researchers in the Langen lab, and they have met him once. They're formally employed by him, but they met him once in the elevator for 30 seconds between floors 3 and 5. Like, that was the only interaction with very nominal advisor. So.
Kristen, before your question, can I ask you a question? Sure. I just want to go back to the application process. You mentioned that you have to have most applications 2 letters of recommendation. How do you go about getting a good letter of recommendation?
That hopefully you've done most of the legwork for before you're actually applying for graduate school. I had my thesis advisor write one of them.
Your undergraduate
my
thesis?
My undergraduate thesis advisor. And I worked with her already for a year and had her for a couple of classes. So there had been a lot of time for us to establish a relationship and for her to see the way I work in a lot of different scenarios. And then I had one of the people I worked for over the summer write the other one. So that was, a summer project. But I knew that he felt that I had done good work over the summer and that I had, accomplished things and asked some good questions and so on. So I knew really it should be someone that has had a chance to interact with you in a meaningful way. I did also have someone who I only had as a professor write the 3rd letter because some of them needed to. But I think it's more meaningful if you've done research for them and put more research into it.
Maybe I should start with, what is a good letter of recommendation? Add that to your answer.
I don't know that I know.
That's an important question.
So, during my undergrad and also a little bit in my graduate school, I helped organize some some like panels where faculty members at the institution that were on the graduate acceptance committee would give feedback to undergraduate students about what you need in a graduate application. So this is where most of this insight comes from. So I have personal experiences. But generally speaking, what you want to do is the letters of recommendation should serve two purposes. One, they should show that the person is a nice person and isn't crazy and start conflict and drama. And the second thing it should do is show that the person is capable of working properly in a graduate environment. So it's really not trouble. A lot of people can fall through the cracks and sort of fall behind on research, start not showing off. But generally speaking, you want to hit those two key points home, and everything else is basically additional bonuses that stand out as a So I would recommend having, if there's a faculty member that should be working with group, very well, you can interact with them a little bit, not too much. It's still good to have a letter recommendation from them for you, because what they can say is that yes, this person worked in my group, they worked closely with everyone in the group, they made some good progress, and I know that maybe here at CIQM for the 8 weeks that you guys have research, that's sort of a window in how you work as a researcher. So if you had a positive experience, then likely they had a positive experience as well. But you also want to have letters from people that know you as a person.
Do you provide anything to the people you're asking? Did you provide like your CV, maybe a couple of statements? Did you provide them with what you were writing to the school, so they, let's go down that line just a little bit, and then we'll get to Krista's question.
Yeah, I sent my CV, and I sent drafts of the statements eventually. I asked them if they would write the letter, and then a little bit later then I sent the material, because I asked a fair amount in advance, and I didn't necessarily have anything written yet. Yeah, so I definitely gave them things to look at, so especially so that they could know what it was I was applying for, and because you don't want them to say, yeah, she would be perfect for your program for marine biology when you're applying for some atomic physics research. So,
yeah, I've had students ask me for letters of recommendation, make it easy for the person. Like, buy me a cup of coffee, sit down, tell me what you want to do, what you're applying to, have a real conversation. Don't just send me an email the night before saying, hey, I met you once at ground school, you might need an email to do by midnight tomorrow. So you want the letter to actually show some personal interaction and be able to speak with some authority, not I had this person in class once. Yeah, you had one person in class and they sat in the back and I couldn't actually pick them up. And yes, provide your CV, provide statements. The dirty secret is once you get past grad school, and if you want a letter of recommendation, you have to write it yourself and then just sign off on it. So somebody's applying for their green card and they need letters of recommendation. I said, sure. And then they go and have it drafted, and then I'll put in a little personal detail, a little editing, but you have to make it really easy for the person who's writing the letter of recommendation to do it. Otherwise, they're just going to say no, or the deadline's going to come and go, and things like that. So provide as much information, try to have it all in one package, ready to go, and don't just send the email the night before. Go make a personal appeal, go to their office hours, talk to them during their office hours. Hey, I'm applying to grad school, this is what I'm thinking about. Programs, let them talk to you for a little bit and actually understand so that they can put something meaningful and personal in the
If I could be there to ask them about your career aspirations in science, they'll be much, much happier to talk to you, because normally people come in and complain about 2 points in their homework score or something. So don't feel like you shouldn't be afraid that you're going to upset them or bother them. Send them an email, go to the office hours, be very happy. I think almost all faculty are very happy to talk to students.
probably they will ask you to write your own recommendation at first. This might feel a little bit annoying at the beginning. I was thinking in this way. And then now I think it's good to do it because you will know better how was your relationship with the professor and you know which points are important. And so you can put it into the reference better and then they will remember it and then they will modify it anyway. They will not send it as it is how you send it to them. They will make it better or maybe even worse according to their honest opinion, but I think it's
So once you're into the research mode, it's pretty much good all the time. No, you don't get to vacation. No, you don't get holidays. I spent years in the lab every year. Something like that. I'll do it down where I go home at 5 now. But your stipend comes every semester. Every semester, your advisor is signing yes, pay the student for this semester. So there is still a little bit of semester to semester. The reality to it, you need to talk to your advisor if you want to do it in an industrial co-op. Don't just say, hey, I'm taking off this month. No, you're not. Like, so.
Like, you talk to your advisor, you know, that you need some time for you to build a digital company, or you're talking to the wrong way to do this. I think that in my physics program here, it's not uncommon for people to do internship this summer after their first year of graduate work, but that usually by the summer after their second year of graduate work, then they're willing to spend the
I know people who have done it, and also people who have done fellowships where they do research like at a different university for the summer while in graduate school. This usually only happens the first 2 years of grad school. It's like in your 5th year, getting close to your thesis, you're not going to take the summer off to go do something different. But I know at Harvard, these sort of industry co-ops they exist. They just aren't more well documented. Two students have complained, and the department has made it a little bit more structured. It really depends on the school. It's definitely a thing that exists.
One of my computer science friends in grad school went to work for Google for the summer. So he's doing computer science still, but it's a little more common in engineering than it is in physics and chemistry. Physics is particularly bad because there is no physics industry. Chemistry, there is a chemical industry. So there are industrial chemistry labs where they need some trained researchers to come in and help on something for a set period of time. And so it's definitely, yeah. I never did it in grad school. I did grad school year round. That's the normal way to do grad school. But certainly, if your intention is to go into industry after grad school rather than to go into academia after grad school, then certainly line that up, tell me about the pay. I'm not going to be a professor. It's not going to happen. I want to go in. Yeah, and then the whole being a professor job, you end up just writing grants all the time. My friends who are professors after grad school, if you want to be a successful professor, you put a couch in your office and you just write grants and you don't go home for the first 3 years. They look miserable. What? Who teaches people to write grants? You learn to write grants in grad school, so you come in and you need funding. No, that's a good question. It's actually
I'm a bigger graduate student. I really
Actually, I could tell when you talked about how many postdocs, how many. I was like, oh, he's written a grant.
So generally what will happen is when you're getting near the end of a lot of faculty members will start if they think you're not like competent. They'll give you responsibilities that you don't really graduate student have. Things like helping write grant proposal or getting involved in those sort of things. And so you do get trained, but it's not in any formal way. You get trained by your class.
Sometimes you get trained I got trained mostly as a postdoc. So some people, that's when they really, because at that point you have to basically support yourself, your own research. So that's another way. But go ahead.
So you come in, you join a group, you've been funded to do research, you've been funded on a grant that was written 2 years ago, right? And so then you need to generate funding for the next student, right? You're working on the last student's grant, you need to generate your funding for your last 2 years and funding for the next year. And so you end up writing grants sort of, and so the advisor will say there's this, so funding organizations put out calls that say we want something about transfer 2D materials to make them more structures. Everyone with a good idea about that, might have a good idea.
So you want to find people to write the grants too.
Yeah.
The application is never end.
Yeah.
Grad school applications.
Think of it as practice.
But yeah, so you'll end up starting to be involved in writing grants as you become sort of mid to senior level grad student. Once you're in the lab doing research and you become the expert on that topic, you start helping write the grant. I was one of the few native English speakers in my grad school group, and so I did all of the English editing, A's and B's, were all sorts of research that
And all your grants were they all said yes?
Returns on grants are really bad. They're in the lottery. They're funding like 2% of grants these days.
I think CIQM, for example, when CIQM went out for funding, I think it was 1%, if I remember.
Can I tell you why?
It's competitive.
Yeah,
it depends on the grant, but in the case of CIQM, it was very competitive.
At this point, can I just add something?
Yeah.
I think, or if you want to continue to graduate school, so you have to be ready for the fails, rejections, and such kind of stuff. So PhD work that's why it's difficult, because you are doing something is not done before. So that's why you don't know how to do it. So you will have a lot of fails to be able to get results.
How many people have done this summer? You're off to a good start.
Just really quick, just in case that sounded really depressing, the fact that you don't get to do it, it's really important to know what you need as a person for being productive. I know personally, if I work like 80 hours a week or even 1 week, I'm just more focused on research that I can't function. So it's important to set your own limits and talk to your advisor about how much time off you're going to have. If you're doing an experiment, this might mean that you're in the lab nonstop for a month. But then when that's done, you say, okay, I need to take a week off. And you just make sure that that sort of rule is well established.
You cannot get such kind of flexibility in the industry, I guess.
Backtracking to the when you ask the professor for recommendation, how are non-STEM recommendations letters? Are they separate or is it the same? Because I've heard if I go and ask a professor, let's say a professor from another department that's not STEM, like if I ask my political science professor, they will still have the same.
If you actually wrote papers, so writing is very important. It's, I think being able to write grants and communicate science and write papers. So if you have a political science class and you wrote a lot of papers, then I think that would probably be a good letter recommendation because the person wrote really good papers, they were well thought out, there were good arguments, things like that. So if it was a class where they could talk about how to do writing, how to do gym class and they're really good at basketball. Not so much. Okay. And there's three, usually 2 or 3 letters, and so having one research and having one about the
I think also when you write your personal statement, if you could tie, for example, I had 2 loves when I was in dance and science, and my personal statement tied the 2 together. I talked about the creative process, how they both have a creative process. Now, I didn't have a recommendation letter from my dance teacher, but the point is that if you do have that 3rd letter from, say, philosophy or whatever, if you, like Arthur was saying, if it's saying something to substantiate how you think, and then if your personal statement is tying the philosophy and with physics or somehow, then if it makes sense, then yeah. But if it doesn't make sense, it will seem not to fit in. You want your package to fit. Everything has to fit together.
I was asking because you said that if you have, let's say, a professor that credits your work ethic, and a professor that credits like your research skill, your work ethic might come from a different professor, or the good things, the good recommendations would come from different sources. But since I've heard like non-STEM professors' recommendations not being as effective.
As long as you still know the professor and they have something real to tell about you, I think if you work really hard in this class and you went to your office hours every week and you wrote a really good term paper, and yeah, you get a letter recommendation. If it's just someone random who's a nice professor and you don't even do it, but you just had class with them and that was it.
It has to fit together. As long as it makes a cohesive presentation of you that's positive.
Yeah. You have to work with what you have. And there were parts of my application that were not the most ideal application ever. But I picked and chose the parts that I thought could bring out the most of my strengths and hoped that would be enough to overlook some of the things that were not.
Hold on, Andrew. I'm sorry. I just want to know, did you guys see your recommendation letters?
Yeah.
So I just want you to know.
Oh yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I say, how do you get a good one? Because sometimes people just ask me for a recommendation letter, and I can write a recommendation letter. Can I write a good recommendation letter? Right. So you have to be careful how you ask. You want to know that it's, because oftentimes you don't see it. Some people will send you a copy as a courtesy, but generally speaking, they won't show it to you. So
If you best school application, you won't check box and you wait to see the
So if you're planning on getting a letter recommendation from a non-STEM faculty member, you should really talk with them and tell them what you hope to accomplish with that letter. And I think that's okay. Don't tell them what to say. So I want you to really, I want you to be able to highlight this aspect of this person. And remember, people reading the letters and reading the essays, they're not administrative officials like they're scientists or faculty members. And so they can sniff out BS really well, and they can also be reasoned with logic. So as long as you clearly lay out what you're trying to do.
not all scientists can be but anyway. Sorry, were you saying? Oh, question.
So, you classes have to say multiple
every school is going to get. So that's why applying to 10 schools, like you're going to have to go back and ask that person 10 times. And so it's nice to them.
Yeah. So when I asked the professors for recommendations, I let them know that I was applying for roughly this number of programs in particular areas. And definitely at least one of the people, when I asked them for a recommendation, at the time when I asked them, I gave them some information that they were saying about, I'm hoping to communicate this in this application. And I was wondering if you would be willing to be one.
Did you give them did you help them understand when they were due? Because some of them have different dates, right? So
Yes,
you have to.
very important.
It's very important. You have to help them. You have to help them understand when they're due, because some of them are due different times, and make sure that they're clear about this is this school. Because someone said you don't want, oh, you said the different majors, but you also don't want University of California, Berkeley to get a letter that says University of California, Davis, right? So you have to be you have to help them make it correct.
I gave them a list that had a date and then all of the applications that were due on that date, and then the next date and the applications that were due that date. So,
Most systems will let you know when the letter gets in, and a lot of times the letter deadline is later than the application deadline. So what happened with me was I had one responsible faculty member that did everything early, but then the other two I was just pestering them, and you really stress out, and they're used to doing things in crunch time, so they all got submitted on time. Very stressful, so it's good to get that. It's good to get ahead of that. Exactly. It's like 11 p.m.
Yeah.
It's an addiction.
Yeah.
They don't realize it, but it's an addiction.
Like, oh, I had done about 10 minutes after.
Yeah, but yeah, to follow up and give people at least that, hey, this is due next week, hey, this is due in 2 days, this is due tomorrow. Hey, I brought you a cup of coffee because I said, hey, please do it.
And if you're going to apply to different programs, like not just a physics program, not just a chemistry program, but a lot of different kinds of programs, it's good to let them know that before you recommend that to write to them. Not specifically mention that. Because then a lot of faculty will want to use the same letter for every, because they don't want to rewrite the letter.
So, go ahead.
It's a little bit different point of view because I didn't get my PhD here. I think going to other countries, Europe or Asia, might be also really something to do. Either as a PhD or exchange student, something. Just try to go different places because it will give you a lot of experience. People are thinking differently in different part of the world, so it's good to know.
And the PhD program structure is very different in different countries. You know, the German system is completely different than the American system.
You could have a faster.
I don't think you can do 6 to 8 years in Germany.
My PhD was 5 years.
Yeah.
That's true.
But I had my master as well, so in total it's 8. So.
Don't be scared.
Yeah,
Yes.
So this is for international, so with respect to what is
Me, frankly speaking, yeah, I'm look like Korean. Yeah, I'm Korean, but I'm born here, so I'm American. But if you're in the STEM area, when I see other Korean students or the Asian or different the student coming from different country, if you're staying the STEM area, actually is no even under this administration.
I was gonna say. Anyway.
Yeah, actually, after getting PhD, well, there are a lot of exceptions, but based on my experience,
for international students, an exceptional scientist. Yeah, there's some other term too for a general person who's international that just has so much to offer the United States. There's a special term for it. I can't think of it right now. But people apply for status under that situation, and it's usually like if you're a super great athlete or an artist or a scientist.
You can get like Einstein. Each one.
Yeah, Einstein visa. No. Huh? Thank you. National. I haven't been with you, but I've been much. Yeah. So basically, yeah. In the interest, in the
National interest rate.
national favor.
Bigger.
Waiver. Okay.
So I'm not international, so my knowledge of the visas is limited to what I sort of hear by gossip, but so getting into grad school is international. People don't care if you're international or American.
No one cares.
Yes. So
in this area.
getting into grad school is fine.
Yeah.
There's basically an unlimited number of postdoc visas, so lots of international postdocs. It's getting into being, going into industry where there's this limited number of visas, and that's the bottleneck. But once you've done your PhD and then a postdoc, and you have a couple papers in high-ranked journals, then there's this way to you go around and collect a certain number of letters of recommendations. So I've signed off on a couple of those because someone needs like 15 letters of recommendation testifying that you're, one of the best scientists in this area, and you get 15 people to sign off on that, and then you somehow get through this cycle. So it is a route to getting an industry job, even if you end up doing a postdoc. And you have a high impact paper, you can say, look, I'm a national interest or excellent scientist. We really want to be here instead.
There's no limitations. It's up to you. You're up to your preference or what you do like, or what you can do. It depends on your context. Yeah. Not limited by national. You don't have to worry about it.
The only additional thing is I work very closely with two international graduate students in my group, and it's just every 2 years or 3 years they have to go through the pain of getting their visa renewed, which it's never a worry that it's not going to go through. It's just they have to, they dedicate a few days of effort.
There might be inconvenience, but no.
Okay, so we just have a few minutes left. I can either have you guys make last minute statements or have you guys ask. Who does not ask the questions? Don't be shy. Ask me. No questions?
Doctor, I have did you ever feel like stuff like that in your law study research?
Yeah, about 4.5. It's like you've gotten past candidacy, but you can't quite see the thesis yet. If you don't read PhD comics yet, go read PhD comics. They're kind of brutally honest, but with a twist of humor. I didn't know about them when I was an undergrad, but they've been running for like a decade now. So yeah, they even turned it into a movie. There's 2 movies now, and they're actually real grad students from Caltech that are starring in the movie. I've met some of them at conferences. Hey, minor celebrities. So anyway, there's one of the PhD comic jokes where they give the enthusiasm and yeah, I got into grad school. Oh, I have to still take classes. Oh, I have to study for quals, take the qualifying exam. Oh, I passed qualifying exam. Oh, yeah, you do research method. Oh, this is dragging. Oh, after funding runs out, I have to graduate and write my thesis. And then, oh, all 4 people who are ever going to read my thesis have read my thesis now. They were on my committee.
Okay, we gotta leave it on a positive note. So I gotta ask. Let's talk about a little bit about some of the benefits of being a graduate student. Maybe, the fancy dinners, or have you traveled anywhere while you were in grad school? Going to conferences. What are some perks or things that I'll put it this way. What are some experiences you think you wouldn't have had you not gone to grad school that are pretty awesome? And I know you're just starting, but you can talk about what you're about to do and you're excited about. So let's start on this end.
Well, I didn't expect that.
Okay, let's start on this end. Okay, who wants to go first? You can think about it.
So I've been lucky enough to go to conferences in some beautiful parts of the world. Years ago, there was a conference at this place called Banff National Research Center, which is in Banff National Park near Calgary, Canada, which is in the Rockies. And it's basically this little tiny town that's made entirely for physics, theoretical physics and math research. And it's in the middle of basically beautiful mountains and lakes and stuff. And while there, I got to talk to a lot of very important people in the field. And it's kind of interesting when you go to a specialized conference, you might get the chance to have a one-on-one lunch or discussion with some of these very things, which you may not have thought you ever. It's not like I got to meet Tom Brady or anything, but it's still like a very, it's really nice to meet these people and realize we're just normal people. It really helps with grad in life in general.
I can't talk about grad school yet, but I'm about to go to Germany for a year to do research at university there on a Fulbright grant. So that's one thing I'm really looking forward to that sort of fits into that doing research.
I actually really enjoyed my time in grad school. It was I had so in the applied physics program, there were, I think, 8 students my year, and we were really tight social group. We all had the same office, we were all taking the same courses, we all sort of took care of each other and down. Well, all right, let's figure out how people might see. And you end up with this group of people who are all going through the same experience, all at the same time. And for most people, it's before you have kids, before you have a mortgage, before you have bills to pay. It's this whole time to just do science. Now I have 2 kids and a mortgage and so I don't have that like nice focused time with this group of people who are all doing the same thing, all doing science together and all supporting each other. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time in grad school and I'm somewhat nostalgic about it. And then you end up finding a good social outlet for a lot of the engineering and science students at the University of Michigan is Argentine Tango. So we all go to Argentine Tango as our like release and social outlet for and so that's you pick up these random skills. And you do meet interesting random people that you didn't expect to meet. The Taiwanese Physics Alumni Association at Michigan has endowed a dinner every spring, and they bring in a Nobel laureate. So you sit down with a Nobel laureate and have dinner with them, and coffee with you. So I actually met a number of Nobel laureates, and they're just people, somewhat the experimentalists are kind of humble. I just got lucky. I discovered boson andesite and sodium before the other guy. Just it was done luck. I picked sodium and something else. Or sometimes the conference. Oh, I described this theoretical physics thing 20 years ago. Why did it take them 20 years to give the Nobel Prize? But the funniest story I have about realizing they're just normal people is I went to a Gordon conference. So a Gordon conference is there's a whole series of them in a Gordon conference, but they're a specialized topic. And they take everybody and they put them in a college campus. So you have to sleep in the dorms. And sometimes you get a roommate. We went to a Gordon conference at Mount Holyoke, and Mount Holyoke dorms, they all have a shared bathroom. And the shower stalls are about this tall. And so I'm sitting in their shower room next to 3 professors who are like top of the field, and they're just all normal people. So you do meet a lot of people, but they're all just normal. And grad school as an experience is largely good because there's a lot of support. All the other grad students want you to succeed. Your advisor wants you to succeed. Everybody's sort of on the same team trying to help things.
Conferences, being a student is very nice, and also when you're done your PhD work, and you will have the feeling that you can complete something. It's yours. No one knows better than you. This subject is good as well, I guess. And you will be a colleague of your professor, so you will be at the same level with them. It's good. You can PhD that.
Yeah.
Seriously, what was I can guess the question, but what was it?
Just basically some advantages to graduate school, some of the great experiences that you wouldn't have had you not pursued this line of education and work.
You said the research, but actually it's up to the advisor's style, but I had a lot of chance to attend the conference. Then some of conference actually held in really fancy place, so that's why I could visit Hawaii. there was a conference, big conference, so I can say how about it. And not only a conference, so we had.
What, did you pay for it?
No.
Okay.
Also, yeah, definitely my advisor's money.
Yeah.
And then also the one more thing is at the University of Michigan, there's from the school funding, there's funding and encouraging the student to attend the conference. So I use that funding. So yeah, that's why my advisor is kept pushing me to attend the conference every semester. So every semester I could go to the place. That's really I liked it. And then in the STEM area, also there are a lot of probably you can see a lot of recruiter. And then actually the recruiter from the industry area or private sector, they treat you out. Definitely. So I enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Nice.
So yeah, that's a good part. Yeah.
There is a sense of being wined and dined for your brain, right?
Yes.
And your labor in the lab. Yeah. So.
It's being surrounded by people that are like-minded and also really passionate about some really weird specific thing that you care about is really, really comforting. Because you go home and try to tell your family or friends that you're working on, I'll be like, yeah, it sounds awesome. You must be really smart. But then going and talking to people and you get to talk about really small details about something, and they know exactly what you're talking about. It's like this weird, someone from across the world has this very tight connection.
Any last questions? We want to thank the panel. Thank you guys so much. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Jack. There's one question.
For grad students, are you guys all grad students from Harvard or currently grad students at Harvard? I don't think I've taught any of this,
Yeah.
I'm a graduate student at Harvard.
are you going for your master's or PhD?
PhD.
I will be a PhD grad student at Harvard a year from now.
That's confidence.
Yes.
I was supposed to start this fall, but I got this fall, so I did.
Awesome.
I'm technical staff at Harvard. I did my PhD at the University of Michigan.
I'm postdoc at Harvard.
I got PhD from University of Michigan, and I did a postdoc at University of Pennsylvania, and I'm doing the research associate at Harvard University. But you can regard it as postdoc. Postdoc means postdoctorate, so after PhD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we didn't explain that. So a postdoc, you get your PhD, and then you go take a research position, usually on a completely different topic in a different lab. It's a nice period where you're not trying to write a thesis, you just have to write papers. And because of the fact that you're usually busy writing grants, the postdocs are usually sort of the people who actually run the day-to-day lab. So I worked under a couple of very good postdocs, and that's really how I learned all my stuff. I learned way more from the postdocs in my lab than I did directly from my advisor. And the postdoc is typically a one-year contract, but can be renewed, and so it can be renewed for typically sort of 3 to 5 years. But you're just responsible for doing research. You don't have to write thesis, you don't have to teach classes. It's being paid out of grants to do research, and then you also write more grants to keep the funding for that.
Not 100% sure, but I think the pay range for postdocs nowadays is about $50,000 to $60,000.
That is accurate, although I've heard of some postdocs getting paid quite a bit more, which is really hard.
Labs are,
Yeah.
you can do a postdoc in a national lab, and that's like 70, 75 a day.
But still not so bad because you get the PhD and if you start with company development
You don't do this for the money. Unless you're doing a startup. Everyone knows that, right?
If you do it for the money, just don't do it.
There are a few exceptions.
Yeah, there are a few exceptions, and low tax rate also you can get the support from outside. So I think because I'm enjoying the post life,
Mm-hmm.
so it depends.
Yeah.
But yeah, on average, it's lower. So if you really go for money, yeah, definitely I recommend the private sector. But I think
it's boring.
when you consider the whole barrier factor, I think it's same. Namaste, for example.
Tomorrow, you guys know we have a career panel. We have a professor, Bill Wilson, who's the head of CNS, executive director of CNS, right? And then we have a patent attorney. So that's the closest we get to someone that's, I mean, I don't want to put him out there, but he's probably making more money than a lot of people. But anyway, so you can ask him about that tomorrow. And then another Harvard professor. Okay. I think that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, wait, one more question?
There's actually maybe one question. I was wondering, I'm sorry, who was it that said you was running Harvard here? That they did the enrollment next week. And Steve, you said you're going for your PhD. What year are you right now? What year did you start?
I started in 2015, so I'm about to begin my 4th year of graduate.
Okay. And so they didn't just apply to the Harvard PhD program or for grad school, but you're deferring your enrollment for 1 year. So what year did you apply? So I just finished my senior year of undergrad, and I applied a whole bunch of places over the course of last year. So my plan was to begin graduate school this fall. Yeah, and so I applied to Harvard as one of those schools and got accepted, and chose that was where I was going to go. And then I submitted a lot of paperwork so that I could actually do how did you go through the application process? I did a lot of research online to try to come up with a list of schools that I would apply to. And I looked at a lot of the different professors who researched what they were working on and chose some of the ones that interested me most. I filled out all the applications for that and wrote the statements and so on. And those were due between December and January. So I submitted all of them, and then over the course of the spring semester got various acceptances, and then went on grad school visits. Most grad schools will pay for you to come to grad school and spend a weekend there and visit, talk to professors, talk to students, so on. So I went on all the visits in March and April, and then decided grad.
So we're going to cut the panel off for now. Thank you so much. If you have other questions, you can talk. If they have enough time, you can maybe come up and ask me directly questions. Thank you.
Thank you.